Hello everyone, welcome to this video. My name is Michael Novak, and today I want to talk about something that's, I think, very taboo. I want to talk about my mom. My mom, she died 2 years ago on May the 5th, 2019, and this is going to be the official video that I've talked about wanting to do for like a year or so. I even talked about it in my time capsule video, but today I'm here to actually do it. Normally I have a script for these types of videos, but today I'm just going to be talking from the heart. So this is nerve-wracking for me. I'm a bit nervous, but let's just get into it. So, where to begin? Let's begin in 2012. So, actually in 2010, my mom, she went to her doctor and said that she had a little bit of trouble breathing. She got out of breath very quickly. And the doctor quickly proclaimed that she had asthma. And so he prescribed her with asthma medicine. And she took that for a couple of years. And then in August of 2012, like a week after summer vacation was over, she was at work, and she, on her way out of work, walking towards the exit gate, she passed out. So they took her to the hospital. They did a bunch of tests on her, and they quickly discovered that she had a very rare lung disease. And they said to her that her lungs were pretty much broken. Basically, she had a condition where she only had about 20% of oxygen in her body, like consistently, where the majority of us, you and me, normal functioning humans, we have close to 100%. So she had 20% constantly. So she could basically not breathe. So they hooked her up to an oxygen machine. She got an oxygen machine at home that was plugged in and was creating oxygen 24 hours a day. And she was hooked up to it 24 hours a day. And then she had these gas masks. She had these tanks of gas, of oxygen, that she could use when she was out and about and doing other stuff than being at home. And so she went on to be hooked up to an oxygen machine 24/7 for the next 7 years. Now, early on in the process, the doctors, they could not figure out what was wrong with her. In fact, it took over 6 years before she was, finally diagnosed. It was only about 3 months before she died that she was actually diagnosed. But in the beginning, they considered doing a lung transplant operation. And I remember my mom, she asked me, she said, do you think I should do it? And I said to her, honestly, of course I want it, because back then they said to her, you won't live for more than a couple of years. So, but with the lung transplant, they guaranteed 7 years if everything went accordingly. So I said to my mom, obviously, I don't want you to die. I was 15 years old at the time. I don't want my mom to die. Obviously, I want you to take the operation, but it's up to you. Now, my mom never ended up getting the lung transplant operation because they discovered that she had a weak heart. Nothing too serious, but just a little bit of a weak ticker, which is a condition that I think a lot of people suffer from. But because of that, they were too scared to do the operation because they were scared that she would die on the operating table. The chances were just too high. So they never went through with it, and she ended up living 7 years with this condition. And I'm glad she didn't get the lung transplant, because if she would have died on the operating table, I would have lost my mom at age 15. Instead, I had her for 7 more years. Now, jumping ahead in time, she was pretty stable with this condition for about 6 years, actually. Of course, she was not able to do very much, but my mom had always been sort of a quiet person who liked sitting at home watching movies and relaxing more than going out in the town and, getting all crazy and having parties and whatever. So she was a very inside person to begin with. So my mom, she adjusted to this new lifestyle pretty nicely, I think. Obviously, the worst part about it for her, I think, was that she could not continue to work. She loved her job. She loved her coworkers. She loved the environment. She loved everything about it, but she had to quit, obviously. But no, so she was stable for 6 years. Her condition was not getting worse. It was not getting better. In those 6 years, she kept going to like doctor appointments and on hospitals, and they kept doing tests on her and so on and so forth. But there was no development. It wasn't going up or down. It was just pretty stable. After those 6 years, that's when it finally began to go downhill. And what happened was, because of this condition, at one point her body was not, it lost the ability to release fluid. So she ballooned up. I think she gained about 30 kilos, actually. And so they took her to the hospital. She lost the ability to walk because of this. So they took her to the hospital. They were able to drain the fluid out of her, and but she had still lost the ability to walk. So they sent her to a rehabilitation center to learn how to walk again. She was there for about a month and a half. Now, this was the first time in my mom's life that she had ever been alone. My mom met my dad when she was 19 years old, and back then she was living with her parents. She was still living at home. And so she moved in with my dad at the age of 19 and had not been alone ever. And so she ended up sleeping alone, being alone for the first time in her life. And this caused her to develop anxiety, a bad case of anxiety. So when she got sent home from this, she was in a pretty rough state mentally. And from that point on, it's all a big blur for me, because the next year or so until she died, from this point in the next year until she died, she was in and out of hospital 10, 12 times maybe. I remember there was a period where for like 2-3 months, I basically lived at the hospital. Now, the cool thing was we lived right next to the biggest hospital in Denmark here, where she was hospitalized. So that's pretty neat, right? But I remember living at the hospital. Like, my life back in 2018 was pretty much me getting up, going to work, after work, going straight to my mom at the hospital, being there until I had to go home and go to bed, getting up again in the morning, going to work, and the cycle would continue. And in the weekends, I would get up, take a shower, and get dressed and these sort of things, and then go over to my mom again at the hospital, be there all day, and then go home when it was time to sleep. So that was my cycle. It all kind of just blended together for me, honestly. And I cracked. I couldn't do it. So I broke down mentally. Now, I still kept going to work, take care of my job. And I was still able to, in some crazy way, I was able to take care of my relations as well, my friends and people around me. But I don't know how I did it. Honestly, I think I went into survival mode at one point, where I just kept on going and going and going, taking care of everything, trying to make ends meet, I guess. I was also studying to become a truck driver at this point. I had a lot of tests and exams and driver's licenses and all kinds of schoolwork, and I somehow, miraculously, I was able to focus on that as well and get through that. But it was tough, man. It was tough. I remember just always constantly having that fear. Whenever I would go to work in the morning, I constantly had that fear. This could be the day, because she could die at any point at this time. And I remember going to work with this fear every single day. I think it was about 3 months before she died. I was at work, and I had only been at work for a couple of hours. It was about 8 a.m. And my brother called me, and he said, my mom was in the hospital at the time, and he called me and he said that he had just gotten a phone call from a nurse, or was it a doctor, I think, saying that we needed to come over to the hospital because my mom had been close to dying that night. Now, they had been working on her all night, and they were able to stabilize her, but she was close to dying. So I'm a truck driver, so I just took the truck. I drove in to the lot, and I just got in my own car, and I just drove to the hospital. And those sort of moments, there were a few of those days were, several. There were multiple in numbers, if you will. So constantly having that fear, and I remember every time my mom would call me, every time my dad would call me, every time my brother would call me, I constantly got that, I was holding my breath because I was so nervous. Now, jumping a little bit further, I remember it was the 4th of May, 2019, and I was at the Copenhagen local zoo with my best friend, and I remember I told her, I said, I want her to die. I didn't put it like that, but I basically said to her, I said, I can't take this anymore. it's okay for me if she dies now. And the same night, the night between Saturday to Sunday, between the 4th and the 5th, at 3 a.m., she passed away. So essentially, like 7 hours before she died, I told my friend, I want her to die. I can't do this anymore. Now, I remember that night, I had a friend sleep over, and we had just gone to bed at like 1 a.m., I think. And at 3 a.m., I was called. I got a phone call from a nurse at the hospital that said, if you want to say goodbye to your mom, get here now. So I woke up my dad and my brother, and I was still living at home at the time. And I woke up my dad and my brother, and not even 10 minutes went by, and we got our clothes on and everything, and we were about to head out the door, and I got another phone call, this time from a doctor that said, listen, if you want to say goodbye to your mom, it's now. So my brother and I, we ran. Like I said, we lived right next to the hospital, which was cool, but we just ran as fast as we could. And none of us are in shape, so it was difficult. But so we ran all the way over to the hospital. We got up to her floor, and I swear to God, like from the phone call from the doctor till we arrived, maybe 7 minutes went by. But when we got to her floor and we were running it towards her room, we got stopped by that doctor, and she said, "It's too late. Your mom has passed away." So we didn't make it. We weren't there for her in her final seconds, I guess. And this is going to be very sort of personal and intense, but I remember we came into her room, and she was laying there, and she was dead. And my brother, he freaked out. Like, he freaked out. Started yelling, started screaming, understandably, obviously, but, you know. And my dad is such a man's man, you know. He's one of those sort of old-time guys, you know. He's a man's man. So I had never seen my dad cry, but he went over to my mom, I remember, and just stood there and just began to cry. And I just remember looking at my mom, and I just kept looking at her, and I sat down in a chair, and I just sat there and just looked at her laying there. And I just couldn't think of anything, and I just couldn't really have a reaction. I just kept sitting there looking at her thinking, her nose is so big. Now this sounds weird, but you have to understand at this point, for 7 years, she had been wearing a tube in her nose because of the oxygen machine. So for the first time in 7 years, I saw her nose. And I just kept thinking, wow, her nose is really big. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, but I just couldn't have a reaction. And about a week later, we had her funeral. And that was the first time I had any sort of reaction. I remember the priest was talking about how my mom and dad met each other, their story. And I just broke down and just started bawling. And I just couldn't stop. I just started crying and crying and crying and crying. And I just couldn't stop. And I remember I was one of the people to hold the casket on the way out to the car, and we had to stop a couple of times along the way from the church out to the car because I was crying so much that I couldn't walk, essentially. But yeah, so I cried a lot that day. But other than that, and it kind of scared me, but other than that, I just didn't really have that much of a reaction. But, you know, I always say to people when they ask me, I say, the hardest part was definitely not losing her. The hardest part has been afterwards. The hardest part is now, and a lot of people don't understand that. That's the thing that triggered me the most, I think, with this entire experience, was that everybody felt sorry for me for the first week or two or month or whatever. But after that, people were just like, oh, well, you know, because I seemed happy and I seemed normal or whatever, right? So people just thought, oh, well, he must be okay with it, you know? But I wasn't. Obviously, I wasn't. And that was the hardest part, because the thing is, I mean, when it happens, everybody was all like, we feel so sorry for you and our condolences and all that crap. The thing is, it's not hard when somebody dies. I don't think so. Because when something like that happens and my mom died, my world stood still That's what you have to understand. Like, my world stood still. Obviously, I stopped going to work for a while, and time just stood still. And when somebody dies, there are so many practical things that you have to get under control. And it took us almost 2 months to get everything cleaned up and everything sort of sorted because of my mom's condition, because our home was basically turned into like a hospital room, okay? So we had so much shit that had to be given back to the different institutions and hospitals and stuff like that. So in that period, time just sort of stood still, But afterwards, that's the hardest part. When you have to go back to reality, go back to a normal life, that's the hard part. That's the part people underestimate and don't think about enough, I think. I'm going to be honest here. When she died, I began smoking a lot of weed. I was pretty much high every day for like 2-3 months because I couldn't deal with it. I honestly just couldn't deal with it. After those months, I was like, I can't do this shit anymore. I can't just smoke my life away, So I quit smoking weed, and I thought to myself, maybe I should go see a psychiatrist, because at this point I had so much anger. You don't even understand. I had so much anger that had been built up inside of me, and I thought to myself, I can't do this. I need to do something about this. I need to get this under control. And I went out to him and saw a therapist for like 6 months. And after those 6 months, when our sessions ended, I said to him, it's okay now, because at this point I felt like I had been given enough tools or whatever to be able to manage. And it worked for a while. It worked for about a year, and I was okay. But then in the last 6 months, it's just gotten way worse again. Just way, way worse. The good thing is I was able to let go of the anger, but it took me a year, like a full year after my mom died. I had just these massive amounts of aggressive outbursts towards people that I loved, people that I care about. I was a total fucking asshole, and I was just angry all the time, and I was just so frustrated constantly because it isn't fair. My mom died when she was 53 years old, 2 days before she turned 54. I was 22 years old at the time. It's not fair. What happened to her is not fair. So I just build up all this anger, and I took it out on people that I love, because it's not fair. How are they able to continue with their mom and their dads and their, happy fucking families, and I don't? But after about a year, I remember I had this epiphany where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't walk around being angry all the time anymore. But in the last 6 months, it's just been getting worse and worse. So I have started a new therapy session thingy, and it's working. It is, and it's helping, and it's getting better. But honestly, man, it's fucking horrible. Fuck me, man. The hardest part is now, because every day I have periods. Every time I go through a rough patch, a rough time, every time something terrible happens, I need my mom. You understand? I need her to be there for me. I need her to take care of me. I need her to tell me that things are going to be all right. I need her to tell me that I'm okay. I need her so much every day. Now, I'm not spiritual. I'm not religious, so I don't believe in an afterlife or anything. So for me, it doesn't really work. I mean, I like going up to her graveyard and sitting there and sort of talking to her, I guess. But it's not really, it doesn't really cut it for me. And I don't feel like she's with me all the time or anything. But the thoughts just, they get worse and worse and worse. The reason why I have started seeing a new therapist is because the thoughts were beginning to fuck with me. Like I still have periods where, for example, I'm at work, I'm driving the truck, and all of a sudden I will just start bawling in the car. Just rolling my eyes, just started crying and crying and crying because of my mom. And I have so many days where I cry so much, and I am so close to calling my superiors, my supervisors, and saying, I can't do this, I need to go home. So she's fucking with my head so much, my mom, that I can't focus on my job, and I can't focus on my friends and my relationships, and it's too much. One thing that I keep asking my therapist is, why? Why now? Why does she keep bothering me and stressing me out now? It's been 2 years. Why is this happening? But there's no answer. I don't think so. I think the only thing that works, honestly, is talking about it. I was talking to this girl recently. We talked about her moms because she had lost her mom to cancer 4 years ago. And she asked me, what is your best advice? And I said to her, honestly, there is none, you know? The only thing you can do, I said to her, the best advice, if I can't give you any, is to just talk about it. Continue to talk and talk and talk and talk until you're fucking sick of talking. You know what I mean? Like, just talk. Talk about it with anyone and everyone. Just don't hold back. But it's so hard. I listen sometimes to the Lucas Graham song, You're Not There, that he wrote to his father. And that song, the lyrics sort of capture how I'm feeling pretty well. Because the problem is not that she's dead, and the problem is not the 7 years that she was sick. The problem is that she's not there anymore. She's never going to meet her, her grandkids. She's never going to see me get married, for example, and all of these things. Like, she's never going to see the man that she made evolve and grow and live a life, But this anger thing, that's the most toxic thing. I have learned sort of to let go of the anger, but it's still very, very hard, because what happened for me was I got so angry at the world, because I was like, why does the world keep spinning when mine stopped? And I kept asking myself, why did it have to be my mom? Why did my mom have to die? Why did my mom have to get sick? And that's the thing, you get built up with so much anger because it's not fair. And that anger is toxic and dangerous. And it's something that needs to be handled. And it's tough. I'm going to be honest. It's tough. Every single day is still a struggle. Every single day is fucking tough. Every single day I keep thinking of her constantly. It's just, I don't know. Food for thought. This has been a really long video, but I think I'm going to wrap up the video now, because this is my story, and it was important for me to tell you my story. Actually, it was one of the main reasons why I decided to return to YouTube after such a long hiatus, was because I want to talk about things like this. I want to talk about taboo subjects. I want to talk about things that we don't talk about enough as a society, because I honestly feel like topics like this are just not talked about. So yeah, this was my story. I hope you got something out of it. If you're sitting there watching this video and you're in the same situation as me, maybe you've lost a parent or a child or a lover or whatever it may be, your wife, your husband, whatever, and you're sitting out there, my best advice, talk about it. Use your voice, talk to people about it. And if you're in a situation like mine, make a fucking video about it. Honestly, fucking, what do you have to lose? Make a video about it. Tell your story. It hurts, but I think it's part of the process. I think this video is part of my process to getting better. So don't be afraid to seek help. Don't be afraid to say, I'm not okay. I need help. Don't be afraid to say to people, I need to talk about this. I need you to listen. I have a hard time saying to my friends and relations out of context, to saying, hey, I want to talk about my mom. Can we talk about my mom? That's a tough thing to bring up, but I'm working on getting better at it. That's it. Thank you so much for watching this insanely long video. I hope to see you again in the next video. This was great, honestly. It was hard, but it was always so great talking about all of this. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing and all that stuff, and I'll see you next time.